Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for the opportunity. This is so nice.
Well, thank you for being willing to have this conversation. It's so valuable to our students and
Yeah.
so thank you.
Yeah, anytime, anything I can do to help.
Awesome. So I'll just jump into our questions if that's okay. Is that good?
Well, yeah, can I ask you, like,
Sure.
how old are the students?
Oh, sure. So I run a broadcast journalism class
Awesome.
for yeah, for high schoolers, 9 through 12. And then I belong to our Minnesota Journalism Education Association. I'm one of the board members there. And and so that is like all of Minnesota's educators that are primarily high school. There's some middle school, but not very many in Minnesota.
Okay.
And then we also belong to a national chapter, but mainly it will just be kind of shared with the Minnesota teachers. But
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of like gear my brain to figure out like who I should be talking to in terms of like age-wise. But
sure, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, they're high
cool.
schoolers.
Awesome.
And most, I mean, it will go out to programs that are like print and like all of the media forms. I personally will share it with my broadcast students, and so yeah, it kind of reaches all of the different areas of journalism. But
Yeah, no worries. Cool.
okay, perfect, awesome. Okay, when did you know that journalism was the career for you?
Actually perfect timing because it was in high school. I started out on yearbook and we had, so actually in high school, I went to Singapore American School and it's like a private school. I grew up in Singapore, but it is kind of like an American public school in private school form in Singapore. So it was like really interesting. Had a pretty interesting childhood. But it was kind of like they try to do everything that an American public school would do there. And so we had yearbook. We had the morning show team, which is kind of like morning announcements and things like that. I was more in yearbook, and my teacher was like, you should give like radio a shot. And so I was like, okay, that's really interesting. And so I was kind of interested in journalism in general because I was just kind of like, I don't know, yearbook, you're reporting on things that are happening within the school throughout the year, that kind of stuff. And so I eventually joined like a newspaper class in high school. And it just kind of like grew from there, the passion. I did a little bit of that morning show stuff, but I wasn't really into broadcast back then. I thought I was going to start out in radio. And so I was like, all right, journalism is something that I would like to pursue. And so I went to Northwestern, I went to Medill, and that's when I really got hooked on broadcast because that's when I realized that I've always been a show and tell kind of person. And yeah, and that's what broadcast is. It's like video and see it and say it. It's not just writing, and it involves a good amount of writing, but it's a different kind of prose than newspapers. So that's when I got really into it. And then as I grew older, I realized like there are not a lot of people who look like me in broadcast. And so that is also something that I value more and more as I continue to grow older. But that's how I got started in broadcast. So.
Very cool. Is there a particular moment or something that stands out to you as your from your time as a student journalist?
That stands out. Well, it was just like happen chance, but when I was in that high school like newspaper class, we had I don't know if kids would know, Michelle Kwan. She's like the Olympic figure skater. She came to visit our school and I had to interview her with like my partner, journalism partner, and she was really mean.
Really?
She was really
Wow.
mean and she did not have time for us. And I was just like, wow, that's so strange. And I was flabbergasted because I was just like a student and I was just like, I thought she was going to be super nice. And whether she was having a bad day, I have no idea. So she was really mean. And then that really taught me, like, moving forward, not everyone's going to be nice to you. And wow, boy, was that true. It's a funny
Yeah.
story. Not a very heartening story, but
Well, I suppose you learned some resilience from from it, from it because not every, as a student journalist, they go against a lot of, people who might not take them seriously. So, um,
And it's not just that they wouldn't be taken seriously, but I think tides have shifted a little bit in terms of like how folks in media are seen in general, especially in the past like 5, 6 years or so. So yeah, resiliency is something that definitely grows. You get thicker skin. Um, Even in general, like approaching a complete stranger to do interviews about something just man on the street, right? That takes guts. That takes guts. And then it takes even more guts to continue to ask more people when the first and second and third person says no, thank you, or go away, or something like that. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. The other thing that you talked about that I just wanted to hit on was just finding broadcasts because you wanted, people to see a face, like yours in the media. Um, Something that kind of ties to that. In what ways can we best represent our communities, through journalism? Um, because, not every reporter, um, you're right, not every reporter is representing our community in the way that they look, although it seems like we're getting better in that way.
Yeah,
Um,
for
but
sure.
in what ways, even as a reporter that maybe is just like a white male reporter or a white female reporter, what can they do to help represent our communities? To, I mean, basically anyone, but
Yeah. I mean, the best thing that we can do, the number one rule of journalism is to like give voice to the voiceless, right? And the best thing that we can do is amplify other people's voices that are deserving of amplification, right? So whether it's finding an expert, let's say we're trying to do a story on some kind of the Supreme Court decision, one of the many Supreme Court decisions that came down, and we want to speak to a lawyer. How about we make a conscious effort to look for a lawyer who may be a woman of color or a man of color, somebody who identifies as LGBTQ plus, just making a conscious effort to find them, because I know those lawyers exist. I know lawyers are POC, and I know lawyers are part of the LGBTQIA community. And it's just that little extra effort that goes probably a long way. And and I'm not saying that we don't want to hear from white lawyers, but it's just nicer to see that, kind of prove that like you have made an effort to see who might be the best in terms of like expert opinion. And not just that, I think it's also when you are, reaching out for something completely random, like, hey, I'm going to do a story on the weather and I want to interview joggers. There are so many different types of joggers. And if you try to make a little bit of an effort to talk to people who might not look like you, then it's just kind of that little step that goes a long way, I think. Does that really answer your
yeah,
question?
yeah, that makes sense. I guess
Yeah.
touching on that, some people have said like, um, when we go to report on a story, we tend to just report on people of color and you in bad circumstances and not necessarily in normal everyday celebrations. Um, and I don't know, is that like is there a way to make a conscious effort in that direction or
Yeah, and that is something that our newsroom struggles with every single day too. We hear that all the time, that, you only ever come to my community when there's something bad happening. That we hear that all the time. And I'm glad that people are pointing it out, and I'm glad that viewers are noticing and calling us out on it, because it is a constant effort. You can't just stop trying, and it doesn't come to you naturally. So, yeah, going back to that example of, hey, it's going to be 90 degrees next week, and we want to do a cute little feature story about how people are trying to beat the heat. Let's just not go to Lake Harriet or Lake Nokomis and interview people there. How about we go to North Minneapolis and then interview folks enjoying Weber Pool, the natural pool that's there, because that's a public park too. And so it's just kind of making an effort to go there. Or we also run into a lot of why do you only ever cover the metro? So we can always, I don't know, you can go to Shakopee or Prior Lake and go to the lakes there and then try to find people who don't look like you and ask them what's going on. Find the dad when it's a story about childcare, because we hear from moms all the time, like dads also play an integral role. So it's just kind of like thinking outside of the box and yeah, making an effort.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Um, just shifting gears a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about your journey to journalism?
Oh, well, I kind of gave you a little preview there. But coming into coming to CARE, I've been at CARE 11 for 5 years now. And prior to that, I don't know how familiar the students are going to be about like the path to broadcast, and it's changed drastically since I left college. But so I went to college, and then at school we had this thing called journalism residency, which is kind of like an on-air internship that wasn't really paid. And my first on-air experience was actually in Lansing, Michigan. And it was a very, very small newsroom, small market where they, were so short staffed that they would put the intern on air. So that was pretty much what happened. So I did a semester of that, and then that kind of put me ahead because I graduated school with a demo reel. So do your students know what a demo reel is?
They do somewhat. We don't touch on it a ton because I assume that they'll do that when they get to college.
That,
But they've
yeah,
seen,
it's just like
yeah.
a sampling of work, like basically a resume, but in like video form. So I left with a full resume, like ready to be submitted to bosses. And that put me ahead. And I was able to start my first broadcast job in Madison, Wisconsin, which was so much fun because I had graduated and Madison is a college town. So everybody that I was reporting on was my age, and it was just a good time. And then I did a year there, and then I moved to Louisville, Kentucky, which was an interesting choice. And I did a year of the morning show there, which was also very interesting because you go to work at 3:30 in the morning, and you're done at noon. And I did that for a year, and then I was the night side reporter on the 11 o'clock show for a year. And after that, came to CARE 11, where I started as on the weekends initially, and then I moved my way up to Monday through Friday dayside. But yeah, that's kind of more in depth for my broadcast stuff.
Awesome. Very cool. I interned in the morning shift at CARE many years ago, and that
Oh,
is,
really? Yeah, it's
yeah,
a rough shift.
it is. It was. I remember like half awake, driving in at 2:30 in the morning. It was rough, but
The only good thing about it is no traffic.
yes, yeah. But yeah, it's early.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing, your storytelling to me, it just really stands out. And so I kind of wanted to ask a question about that. What advice do you have students on building their storytelling or their writing skills?
Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you. I feel like everyone at CARE is such an incredible storyteller, and it's just so strange because we come from this like powerhouse storytelling workshop, and we all have really different styles. So no stories are the same, even if we're kind of on the same topic. Um, so it is really hard to just pinpoint one, but I think, and not to sound so cliche, but people, mm, not necessarily, they don't remember what you say to them, but they remember how you made them feel. And I try to turn that back around, and I try to focus on how people are making me feel. So when somebody is telling me a story, and usually in local news, it's not the best day of their lives that they're talking about it. And so I try to focus on how you are feeling, like how are, and I ask questions like, so how do you feel about that, or what do you feel about that? Oh, I'm sorry, like that must have made you feel X. And I think that is something that I prioritize, because eventually feelings are if the feeling is the only thing that's probably going to be left once our attention span leaves the television screen, right? And maybe you might not remember specifically what the story was about, but you say, oh my gosh, like I felt so bad for that person, or I felt so sad for that person, and you remember that. So I try to focus on that. I also try to focus on I don't know, something that like makes a story sparkle. So whether that's like a one line that I like really put an effort into making that, that zinger, or like that pun, or that line, just something extra that like kind of makes you go, huh, what a viewer go, that's funny, or okay, all right, I see you, that kind of thing. That is what I try to do in my everyday practice.
Awesome. Those are all really, really good tips for them. So thank you.
Yeah.
Um, what has been your most memorable day in the newsroom?
Memorable day in the newsroom. Actually, it is not in the newsroom, but it started in the newsroom. So several years back, I did a story on this blind sled dog. It's kind of like the Iditarod for here, but the Bear Grease. The It's like a sled dog race that happens up north in Duluth. And I wanted to do a feature on this dog that had no eyes. And it was a sled dog that ran in the race and was going to run in the race. And so this is all the way up in Grand Marais, which is like a million hours drive from Golden Valley. Um, and so my photographer and I are like traveling up, and we woke up so early to meet this guy at 10 a.m. And we're driving up, and it's like snow everywhere. This is mid-January. And we're driving up. We're so excited. And then after the several hour drive, we get stuck on a snowbank, like literally outside of his house, but it's too far for us to walk, and there's no cell service. And I can't call anybody. And we're trying to dig out everything. Like we're doing the little tricks where we pull out the car mats and try to drive over it. I'm wearing like my snow pants, snowsuit, everything, and I'm just digging with my hands. I'm trying to get this news car out. And then like 20 minutes of struggling, the guy that we were trying to meet, the owner of the dog, he starts driving around because he was worried that we didn't show up. And so he came and found us. He rescued us by pulling us out of the ditch with his pickup and like ropes tied to the car. And we ended up doing the story, and the story was completely phenomenal because it's just capturing this beautiful video of the dogs going down this trail, and it's like dead silent because of the snow, and you can see the pine trees and the birch, and it's so gorgeous. And this guy just loves his dog so much, and this dog just will not quit even though he literally has no eyeballs. And so that was a really amazing story that ended up winning an award, which was really nice. And then several years later, we got notice that the owner had passed away because he was sick. So that really, I made a connection to that person, and that really tore me. But that was just like one story arc that stands out to me in my career.
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
feels like when sometimes things go wrong, those are the things that are usually the most memorable and kind of stick with us sometimes.
Yeah, I'll just never forget it. I'll never forget that dog. I'll never forget the owner. It was great.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Just trying to, in what ways? Oh, we just talked about that one. But I do have a question about just what your to day looks like in the newsroom.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Um, so things have changed significantly because of COVID, and we're now trying to switch back to everything in person. So on a normal day, our meeting starts at 9:30, and that is our editorial meeting. That's when reporters and producers come to the table with story ideas, and it might be something that they saw in the Star Tribune, or it might be a completely new enterprising idea, something about something that's happening in their neighborhood and they haven't seen before, something like that. So we all bring ideas, everyone participates. And then our bosses just kind of like decide what stories that we want to go with, and that depends on what's happening during the day. Also, we're working around things that are normally happen to scheduled to happen. So if there's a press conference with the Minneapolis mayor that we know is happening at noon, somebody will get assigned to that if it's an important story. So we're just kind of stacking the puzzles in the beginning of our day. And then once the reporters are assigned to the stories, we are just kind of like off to the races, and I'm making calls. to find experts to interview or to try to reach this person, stalking them on Facebook and adding them as friends and stuff like that, and chatting them up and asking them or begging them if they want to be interviewed by KARE-11 on TV. And surprisingly, people don't want to be on TV because of whatever reason. And yeah, it's actually not that easy to convince somebody to be on TV because it's an inherently uncomfortable thing, I think. And so a lot of our day is making story pitches and then pitches to be on our air. So we're always like pitching, please help us, please help us. Like this is what we need from you. And then we go out and do those interviews, come back, and sometimes it takes several hours. Sometimes you get lucky and they're like, come on over right away. And you get that interview, you come back, you shoot the video, and then you log the interview, and then you write the story, and then either you edit your own story or the photographer that you're working with edits the story, and then comes 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever newscast you're in. You either, front it in the studio and chat with the anchors, or you're live out in the field, or you shoot a look live, which makes it look like you're live, but you're not. And then you get to go home.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Touching back on the difficulty, like getting people on air, my students also face that problem just in a school. They can't get teenagers who you would think, they're on TikTok and everything else all the time, but they struggle getting people to want to, do the broadcast report interview. And so what are some things that you do that work to get people to kind of sign on for that?
I tell them it's not live, which is very helpful. I'm like, no, it's not live. Don't worry. It'll be easy. I'll ask you. You just look at me. Don't look at the camera. It'll be like you and I are talking casually. You'll even forget that you have this mic on. Or somebody will be like, I don't have any makeup on. I don't feel comfortable. I'm like, you don't need to have makeup on. You look beautiful. I mean, you don't have to lie, but I mean, I tell them that. Or some people are like, you can't film in my house, it's a mess. And I'm like, I'm only going to shoot this corner. How about you clean up that corner? And we will only pretend like this corner is the only place that exists in your house and stuff like that. And I think it's more just about convincing. And the most important part is you got to know when to say, yeah, it's okay. I don't want to make you feel any more uncomfortable than you already do. And you just move on. So
Sure.
that's also an important skill too.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then just what advice do you have for student journalists trying to get into the field?
Stay true to yourself, stay true to journalism. It's so important right now. And this work, I think, is especially for broadcast students. If you are doing it because you want to be on TV, I think you're doing it for the wrong reasons. I really do think that my job is more of a public servant, like a public service announcement / public servant, because we're here to serve the community. And the part of you with makeup and fake eyelashes and standing in the studio, that is possibly the last thing that you should be worried about. It should be more about, am I making an impact here? Am I helping somebody? Am I letting somebody know about something that they didn't know about before? Those are the things that you need to stay true to. And also, just because it's local news doesn't mean that you can't show your personality. I really think that news people who show authenticity and their personality, whether it's goofy or whether you're funny or whatever, I think that's also really important. And I think that's also what connects you to your community. And that's what makes you stand out. So if you've got that sparkling personality, be serious, yeah, but let it show once in a while. And I think that's also really important because I don't want students to think that local news is all serious and it's a persona that they have to take on. Just be yourself, be true, be authentic, and don't forget that this is a public service job.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions?
I think that we You answered them all very well. I wish I had my students with me, but summertime, and normally I have them also ask their own questions, but I really appreciate your time and being willing to have this conversation because this will be really helpful for all of them and for other teachers too.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I feel like I still really don't know what I'm doing, but I
Well,
really appreciate your reaching out and I feel really honored to be a part of this.
well, thank you so much. I really,
Yeah,
really appreciate your time. So
yeah. Nice to meet you, Rachel.
nice meeting you too. Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.